Hey guys, what is going on? Carter here. I'm back at it again with another video for you guys. This time it is on a budget folder, a budget tactical folder out of Hallmark Cutlery's Bad Blood line. It is a collaboration with custom knife designer Sean Kendrick. Now, I've been a big fan of the Bad Blood line since it came out a few years ago, mainly because I really like Sean Kendrick's designs. I like his finishes. I like his work ethic. He does amazing, amazing stuff. But unfortunately, the only way you can get his designs is through this budget line from Hallmark Cutlery. He doesn't have any other mid-techs or anything that I'm aware of, just this collaboration right here. Not just this knife, but I mean the line, the Bad Blood line, or at least part of the Bad Blood line. Maybe I'll talk about that a little bit more. But his stuff is really, really cool, so I was excited to get this. Now, I'd already reviewed a few knives from the first wave of knives coming out of this line a couple years ago. I think it was the Dreadnought, and I forget the name of the other one. But they pale in comparison to the second wave of knives coming out of this line. This is one of them. This is the Partisan Nano, based off of his Partisan folder, which is also based off his Partisan fixed blade. And it looks remarkably similar to the actual custom knife coming out of Kendrick's shop right there. It is actually quite surprising. It is done really, really well, and you get some cool features with this knife. Now, that being said, this is a $40 budget knife, so that comes with its own set of limitations, and we'll talk about that, namely materials and things like that. I did have a couple of issues with this particular knife, mainly with the pocket clip. I'll talk about that a little bit more here in a minute, but first, let's get some specs on this knife. It is a beefy, big, chunky knife, and it has weight to back that statement up. But the length on this is about 3.5-inch blade right there. Overall, 9 inches. So definitely not a small knife, but the biggest thing is the weight. It is a hefty, hefty folder. Coming in at 7.9 ounces, almost 8 ounces for a 3.5-inch blade. That is pretty heavy. However, I did carry this a number of days, and it really didn't bother me all that much. Maybe it's because I knew what I was getting into. I knew it was heavy. I knew it was going to feel a little bit heavy in my pants, but it carries quite sleekly. You can see it's not super wide. It's not super thick, so it carried quite nicely, even though it had the weight. You can see the thickness of the blade stock right there. So this is something kind of akin to a Strider in terms of its overuse or overbuilt kind of use that it has. The blade steel on this is 8CR 14 MOV, so what you would expect coming out of China in this price range. Somewhat comparable to maybe AUS-8, possibly, if you crunch the numbers just right. Some people have said it's similar if heat treated correctly. Other people say it's a little bit off, but I would say for your average knowledge base, you could say it's comparable to AUS-8. You're in that ballpark. It comes with a bead blasted finish, which I am not a fan of. One, I don't like the look of it, and two, it rusts quite easily. And I'll get to the tragic part of this story here in a minute with one of the reasons why I picked this up, or at least why I was so passionate about getting this knife, which didn't come to fruition because of some issues with it. It comes with a nice micarta scales right there, and that's really the selling feature of this knife, in my opinion. You don't see micarta scales on this price range of a knife very often, if at all, and they are done really, really well. They're nice and contoured on the edges, very smooth. You can see with the patterning how they're contoured, really, really nice. There's also some grooves cut in here for grip and things like that. Really nice scales, and to me, that's what sells this thing. The first wave of Sean Kendrick collaboration knives coming out of this line had kind of a cheaper G10 type feel to it. Wasn't executed amazingly well. I didn't have a problem with it because it fit in line with the cost of this line. It didn't strike me as being off or you were getting ripped off or anything like that, but it definitely doesn't compare to this awesome micarta right here. Really thick stainless steel bead blasted liners right there. G10 backspacer, not plastic. These are so thick you can see they actually had to do a cutout in order to get the spring tension just right on that lock bar. Lockup is right in the middle, and it is rock freaking solid. It is so solid, guys. I mean, this thing doesn't budge at all. And being stainless steel on stainless steel, you're not going to have to deal with the stick issue. You're not going to have to deal with premature wear, anything like that. That is one of the benefits. However, the downside is the weight. This really adds a lot of weight. Not skeletonized at all. It is just thick, thick steel liners. Look at the detent here. Detent is actually very good. Strong, surprising. You can watch it flick open. Really flies open. It's on nylon washers right there. Really thick nylon washers, actually. Nice thick stop pin right there. Straight cut tang for the lock face. And overall, just really, really nice. You can see how it's finished quite well. I mean, they're not batting for the bleachers with the materials being used or any crazy finishes or anything like that. But what they are doing, they're doing it well. You can see the centering right there. Everything is nice and smooth. If I can get a focus here, sorry guys. Everything is nice and smooth and flush, centered, like I mentioned before. Everything is finished very, very well with what they're dealing with. Dual thumb studs, really easy opening, nice blade shape there, kind of a clip point with some good belly. It has feels like a flat ground, or maybe actually a really light hollow ground blade right there on the grind. So it's pretty thick behind the edge. You're not going to get a super, super razor sharp hair popping edge on this thing. Well, I mean, I guess you could depending on the angle you went for, but it is really thick behind the edge. That's going to mean it's very tough. It's very strong. It's not going to chip on you. Once again, depending on the edge that you actually put on it, but coming out of the box, it's really thick, really nice. You're going to be able to do a lot of damage with this thing before it gives you any kind of problem or anything like that. The blade stop I mentioned before is right there. Nice thick pin in the back. Now let's get to the negatives, right? I've been talking about how awesome this knife is for the $40 range. If this is something you're wanting to get into, keep in mind this is a heavy duty, thick bladed, tactical style folder based off a custom design, which by the way, the design itself is absolutely beautiful. I love it. I really, really like it. The ergonomics are superb on this. The jimping is great, but all this kind of speaks back to Sean Kendrick's design. Not so much the company or how they produced it. The design behind this is just solid because of the man who did the designing. Now, the negative features of this knife. The main reason why I bought this thing, or that I was so excited to get it, is to do some customization on it. I wanted to give a nice dark acid wash to the blade, to the liners, to the pocket clip, to bring it kind of closer to a Sean Kendrick custom knife. And I think that really would have, blew this thing up over the moon. It would have looked really, really good. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to make that happen because the screws that are holding this thing together, so this is actually constructed just like a custom Emerson. It's got the scales right here that you take off with these 6 Torx screws, not 6 Torx screws, but size 6, T6 Torx screws right there. And of course the pivot. And then underneath you have 2 other screws that go through the back and into the opposing liners. And there's 2 on each side. So to take this fully apart and to actually remove the blade, you have to take everything apart. You can't just go in from one side like a lot of knives and completely take out the blade, have full access to it. You have to take the whole thing apart. And I'll get to the second part of this tragic story here in a minute. But these screws under here, holding these liners in, the inset screws, I cannot get them to budge at all. First time I tried it, I thought it just had some light Loctite on it, like the pivot, where I just break it and I'd be good. Cranked on it with my T6 screwdriver and it bent the bit. It actually spun the bit around. So then I was like, okay, crap, I gotta heat this thing up. Took a lighter to it, heated it up to the point where the G10 was smoldering. Still could not freaking budge it. Ruined another bit, bent it, and stripped some of the teeth too. So I had to order some new bits. I cannot get this thing apart. Now I could try to get a soldering iron and put heat right on the screws and get them really, really hot and do it that way. But I don't have a soldering iron. And frankly, the cost of one is about half the cost of this knife. So I don't know if I'm going to do that. If I do end up getting a soldering iron, maybe I'll come back and try this project at another time. But for now, I'm just going to put it on hold. But it is a bummer I couldn't get this thing apart. And actually, now that I think about it, it's all a moot point anyways, because I basically ruined the ability to take this knife apart now anyways. And that has to do with the other major issue, really the only major issue with this knife that I found, and that is the pocket clip. And not the pocket clip itself. It's designed very well. It holds in your pocket really well. It does have a little bit of a warm spot right here. Notice I said warm spot, not hot spot. You notice this in your palm, but it's not painful. It's not uncomfortable. You do notice it though. But the pocket clip itself works great. Nice spring retention. Holds in your pocket very nice. Problem comes into how they did the fixing it to the knife itself. Now the holes in the pocket clip are perfect. They're the right size. Obviously what they screw into, this liner, is perfect. But the holes in the micarta scale is about 3 or 4 times larger than they should be. They're huge holes. So what that does is it creates kind of a little pivot point for these screws to kind of move on, because they're only affixed down here into this top scale. They are not held or supported by the scale at all. And so this pocket clip would just slide around back and forth. And as it would slide around, the screws would become loose. Even just opening the knife, you know, you kind of put pressure on this pocket clip when you're kind of torquing on it to open it up. I said torquing, not twerking. When you're trying to open it up, you're moving this thing around. It was a real pain. The only way I could find to fix it is to basically Gorilla Glue this son of a bitch in there. So that's what I did. So I have Gorilla Glue holding this thing all the way through. It's expanded and filled up this micarta scale all the way, and then it actually pushed up through the screws and up around the base. So this thing is going nowhere. And like I said a few minutes ago, you have to take this scale off in order to get this knife apart. You can't take the knife apart just on this side. It actually has it's not a bushing, but it's a post that goes through the pivot hole, and then both these screws screw into that post. So if you take off this scale, and if you were to unscrew these 2 screws on this side, still wouldn't come apart, because you would have to do this 2 screws on this side, because they're coming through and holding the thing together as well. So that does make for a very robust build. This thing is not coming apart. You could probably beat on just about anything with this knife, and it's not going to come apart on you. But that also means I'm kind of screwed for messing with this thing. But other than that issue, I really like it. And if you guys have one of these knives or a similar build from this company, please let me know if you have that same issue. I bought this off eBay from a seller who said it was new, but you know how that goes. Maybe it's not quite as new as he's leading on. Maybe he actually Loctited this thing with the wrong stuff or super glued it, putting it together because he didn't want it to fall apart. Who knows? I can't guarantee that it comes this way from the factory, because I didn't get this from like a dealer. I got it from an individual on eBay, just selling it as a new knife. So that's it, guys. There's a look at the Partisan Nano from Bad Blood Knives, being produced by Hallmark Cutlery. Check it out if you want a no-nonsense, heavy-duty, and heavy tactical folder in the $40 price range. I think it's really good for that. And as always, please give me a thumbs up, give me a comment, give me a like. I just said that. A like, comment, subscribe, all that fun stuff. And I am out of here until the next video. You guys take care. Later.